and welcome to Be the Change, a YouTube series brought to you by Canadian Gender Equity. My name is Corey Hunter, and I'm going to be your host. This week, we're talking about the difference between gender and its expression and sexual orientation. A lot of times, we put people within both into an LGBTQ umbrella, also known as the queer community. We do this because we want to be inclusive, and we want to make sure that we are showcasing the diversity within our community. However, we want to take a little bit of time to look into that diversity so that we can have a better understanding of the language that we use. We need to start by understanding what exactly is gender, how do we express it, and what does that mean for us in our social settings. And then we want to look at sexual orientation and understand what that is as a separate thing. One is relating to our identity, and the other one is relating to our attractions. And we're going to start to pick that apart and understand it in a short little clip. So we're going to start by breaking down what is gender as a social construction. Now, if you look out there on the internet, different YouTube blogs and things like this, you'll find a lot of different definitions around gender, but most of them reflect something to or similar to this one here from the World Health Organization, where we recognize that it's the socially constructed characteristics that basically identify us as being male or female or somewhere in between. A number of newer definitions for gender that are coming out nowadays are more inclusive and recognize that it's not just a binary system with these male and female ends, that there's actually a lot of other things going on in between. So why do we see this diversity? Because it's a social construction. So there will be variation over time in different cultures, in different contexts, and we want to recognize that and pick out the most inclusive definitions and adopt those ones. So, if gender is an expression, how do we express it? Well, there's a lot of different ways. The clothing that we choose, the way we style our hair, whether or not we wear makeup or accessories, the different activities that we engage in, and even some of the company that we keep, the way we walk and talk. A lot of those things have become engendered over time. We've created social beliefs around this being masculine or this being feminine. And we're going to explore for just a second exactly why and how that happens. But before, I want to point out something really neat. This doesn't just happen as we get older. This actually happens at a very young age. Young children have modeled for them exactly what it is to be a boy and what it is to be a girl because of a number of different social forces around them. Advertising, media, different people engaging in front of them at home and in the community. And they slowly build up ideologies around gender. Young children can recognize that boys often wear black and blue and superhero shirts, and they'll engage with games like soccer and building towers with Lego, whereas girls are more likely to wear pink and purple and dress with crowns and flowy outfits. For activities, they like to dance, they like to play with dolls and do each other's hair. Very different activities, very different ways of expressing themselves with their clothing. And these young kindergarten children, this is where this information came from. These are observations that they can make. So right away from a young age, we're affected by these social constructions and we start to see them. So where are they coming from? Well, first of all, let's start by understanding that most of our world sees a binary gender structure. So that means that we have male on one side and female on the other. We see the two. And we want to take a moment to recognize that this is not really very accurate. In our physiology, about 7% of our global population is born intersex, with sexual characteristics, either primary or secondary, of both sexes. This diversity is actually the same number of redheads that we see in our global population. So right away, if we see that kind of diversity within our physiology, we need to start recognizing that we should see more diversity within our gender constructs. And that's where a lot of this other, these new definitions and these new terminologies are going to come in a few minutes. But before we get there, let's take a moment to identify that cisgendered individuals are people who have corresponding physiological sex and gender expressions. So what that means is their physiology was identified as being male or female, and it reflects accurately the social constructions in their world. They act, dress, and engage in the world in a way that is considered to be socially appropriate for that sex. And they have also adopted that as a pronoun and as a part of their identity. And a lot of times, wow, these things happen from interesting ways. I mentioned that the world around us kind of portrays to us how it is that males and females are supposed to act or supposed to dress. And for cisgendered individuals, who have this correlating physiological sex and identity, they may not recognize that framework because it just lines up for them. But for individuals who do not, who we're going to learn about more in a moment, well, they're going to see this structure a lot more. They're going to notice things like when we walk into a shoe department, we don't see everything organized by size from smallest to largest. Rather, we see a men's department and a women's department dictating exactly how it is or what styles men and women are supposed to wear. We see washrooms becoming engendered. That's not the purpose of going to the bathroom, but for some, the purpose is to have privacy and do what we need to do. It is not anything really that gender related. But yet we've engendered those facilities. And if you go to different bathrooms in different countries around the world, you will notice variation in the way they are structured. So again, why do we see this variation? Because there is a social construction there. In a number of situations, we put people in a position where they need to identify their gender expression. And again, for cisgendered individuals, this is usually non-problematic because you go there and it lines up. Society's expectations, your physiology, the way that you feel comfortable expressing yourself, they all correlate. So let's take a little bit of a look beyond there. What about people who don't have that correlation, who are not considered to be cisgendered? These are people that we often identify as being the transgender community. And I want you to think about the transgender community as being not only an individual identity, but also a bit of an umbrella term for other people that we want to acknowledge and support as well. So first of all, it's often considered an umbrella term, but some people will also adopt it because it is not too specific. A lot of people don't like going around and identifying their body parts and what they've had changed about them or they haven't had changed. And so transgender is a bit of a safer umbrella term that they can rely on. But we want to note that there's a number of different identities that may fall under the umbrella of transgender, and that each one of these people are very unique and different than others. I also want to remind you that this list on the screen is not all inclusive. Again, relating to social constructions, as we look around and as we continue to progress, I would not be surprised if this list changes and adapts to be more holistic and more inclusive. We recognize that transgender can be an identity that people adopt, as can transsexual, whereas this refers more specifically to people who have had some amount of physiological change to their body, either in hormone replacement therapy or in surgical options. We see people who identify as genderqueer, non-binary, gender fluid, recognizing that they may feel elements or they may feel related to elements of both genders, both ends of this spectrum, the female and the male. And so they express somewhere uniquely in the middle. Again, there are a number of variations. I could talk at length for it, but what we really want to take away from this is the fact that there's diversity. It is not just a binary system of male and female. There's actually a number of other identities in between, a number of other ways to express ourselves, and a number of other ways to feel good about the way we express ourselves. It's important to note that people in the transgender community do not all go through the exact same experiences. Some individuals will socially transition, while others will go through hormone replacement therapy, and others still will go through surgical options, either for secondary or primary sex characteristics. Now, this comment here is something I want to draw a line to. Why isn't it enough just to be gay? Why do people have to cross-dress? Why do people have to change their body? Why do we have to change the language around gender? Well, the reason why is because gender expression and sexual orientation are two very different things. Who we are attracted to and what our interests are not the same as the way that we express ourselves and the way that we dress and the way that we appear. So, sexual orientation, this is the other side of it. This is who we're attracted to. It relates to our sexual, romantic, and the different interests that we have. And again, there's quite a bit of variation when it comes to sexual orientation. We see individuals who are heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, bi-curious, and many, many others. I want to remind people also that this is not going to be an all-inclusive list, that depending on the time that you're watching this video, how we're progressing, where you're at, you may be aware of other orientations that are appropriate for your area. Again, this speaks to the social construction that we have. What we really want to take away from this is that we don't need to fit into a single box. You can have an expression that suits you. You can have an attraction, and that's a separate thing. And so this helps us recognize what that diversity within the LGBTQ community is. What is sexual orientation? It means who do we love and who do we have interest in? And we know that it doesn't always have to be the opposite sex or the opposite gender. It could be any number of gender expressions, because that's the other side of the coin. And that's just a big part of who we are. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, make sure to check out our premiere video from last week. Next week, we'll be coming out with a new little snippet, and we'll be talking about new elements from the LGBTQ+ community. Another video to check out if you haven't already, my interview with Steve James Lockhurst, a Moncton YouTuber. So check that out if you haven't already, and make sure to also subscribe and follow. And follow us also on our website at canadiangenderequity.org. Thank you.